on there.
Hey, Dewan, what year did you graduate from high school?
76.
76?
Yeah.
Okay. I was looking through some old yearbooks and I came across a picture of yours, and then I couldn't remember what year it was.
Centennial, 1970, bicentennial, 1976.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Mrs. Singer.
Hello, how are you all?
Good.
Well, Mary.
Hello.
Oh,
I'll give you all
got
a
looks
warning.
like another minute.
I'm in my office and my internet can be spotty sometimes. It hits dead spots and starts buffering. So if it does that, you'll see me turn my camera off. So I might be back and forth in terms of being able to see me, but my ears will be there the whole time.
There you go. That's fine. Well, it's 6 o'clock, and we've got a quorum. It looks like we got 6 of us. Who are we missing? We're missing David Vest. And who are we missing?
Regina.
Regina's here.
We're missing
Mr.
Charlie
Barrett.
Perkins.
Oh,
Still
Mr.
waiting on-
Perkins, yeah, our attorney. We need him.
And then our vacancy.
Yeah.
And our vacant. That's it. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. It's 6 o'clock. Special meeting, Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission. Agenda January 14th of 2021. Wow. It's be a little hard to say that one. Commission business, approval of our December invoices. Need a motion to approve our December invoices.
I'd make the motion, Stephen.
Motion by Mr. Smith
I'll second, Singer.
and a second by Mrs. Singer. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Thank you. Second, commission business is B, under B is approval of the December 10th minutes. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes. If you need a moment, take a moment, go through them. If there's no changes, I'll entertain a motion.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
We did a lot of discussion about the villages at Falls Creek, and then it just stops. What did we, with Fall Creeks, was the developer and the homeowners going to get together and try to work out some of their differences? Because it doesn't say it.
Yeah, that was a big one. We did, I think, leave it with, hey, let's see if they can work out some of the differences and then maybe come back to us.
And I thought it said within a month.
Yeah, you would have thought we'd have had them on the agenda here.
No.
Joe, do you have, or Ben or Matt have any updates on that? Do you know?
Yeah, I know they did. I talked to Nathan Billings last week. I know they had set up the meeting. I'm not sure if they've met yet, but we also got in a preliminary subdivision plat January 1st for next month's meeting. So they were going to meet between last month and next month. So it's on the agenda for next month. And I know they set up the meeting. I'm not sure if they've met yet.
Okay.
I know it's in process.
So probably just because of the holidays and everything, they probably didn't have the time to have the meeting. So sounds like it'll be our February meeting.
Yeah, but if you want the minutes to reflect that discussion, I can have Janie listen back through the tape and try to summarize that in the minutes.
Yeah, maybe we should. I mean, great point, Mr. Mifflin. I think it should be noted in there because how many times have we gone back just to maybe the minutes to review what we thought we discussed? And if things are missing, that's going to make us have to go back through the tape. So maybe have Janie add a couple things, listen to it again, especially that application and add a couple things to it that maybe she missed first time around. All right.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Other than that, anything else? Any other changes?
No.
All right. So I need a motion.
Also moved, Charlie Mifflin.
Charlie Mifflin. So motion by Mr. Mifflin,
I'll second it.
a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Carries. Under C, approval of the January agenda. Joe, is there any, I see, well, is there any other changes on here other than currently?
No additions or deletions.
Okay, so I need approval of the January agenda.
I make a motion.
Motion by Mrs. Mizell,
I second.
second by Duan, Mr. Garrett, sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Carries. Item for postponement or withdrawal. Looks like we've got a couple postponed. If you're here for, I'll go through them one at a time. FSP 2020-46, the Wireman and White property, it's been postponed more than likely till next month. So again, if there's anybody in the audience that is here for that one, again, it's being postponed. Secondly, under E, it's FSP 2020-49, the Bolton property. That one is also postponed. So if you're here for the Bolton property, that will be postponed till next. Anything else, Joe, being postponed that I'm maybe unaware of or it doesn't reflect on the agenda?
No, they didn't send notices for those two items to either. So there shouldn't be anybody here for them.
Gotcha. All right, so I don't need a motion for that. And then consent agenda. I think there were, now, was the first one 44 consent eligible?
No, that has a waiver in it with the
Gotcha.
driveway.
Oh, you know what? I apologize. Oh, yeah, consent agenda. So it doesn't look like we have anything under consent agenda at all. Because I think all
so.
three of them needed to be heard. So then we'll move right on to old business, small cell tower ordinance public hearing. Where's Charlie? He's still not here?
He
I
emailed
think
me about 10 minutes ago, so I know he's at his
So I
computer.
think we need
I
to.
saw him a minute ago.
Okay, I think we need to make a motion, right, to go into public hearing.
Correct. Can
So
open the public
I need
hearing.
to entertain a motion to go into a public hearing or open it up as a public hearing.
Do you want to do that before we get Charlie on, or you want to move to something that we can discuss for a few minutes?
Well, I don't know. Ben, where's your dog? Sorry. I think we can do it without, I don't think we need Charlie to be part of the public hearing. I mean, as long as we make the
Right.
motion to go into or open it up for a public hearing, I think then Matt can talk, because Matt's going to talk a while. And hopefully
Actually,
now and a few minutes in, hopefully Charlie should, join us. If you're
All right.
okay with that.
That's fine with me. I'm just going to say at some point, we probably need to have him or somebody around just to swear. Anybody else wants to speak?
Well, correct. I mean, as we move on, and Matt's going to go through a lot, correct, Matt? You're going to go through quite a bit before we open it up for comment.
Actually, it's going to be me, Mark.
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
I'm going to cover it.
Okay.
I'm not going to go through too much, but I can drag it out.
No, please don't.
Okay. Well, if you've opened the public hearing, I'll go ahead and get started.
We have. Go ahead and get started. And
Okay.
while you
Okay. You all hopefully will recall this small cell tower ordinance. We brought it to you in the summer. I think we did it on a couple of meeting agendas, but you recommended approval.
I'll close this.
There's Charlie. Okay. You recommended approval of the text amendments to the zoning ordinance to add a small cell tower section to the ordinance. We forwarded that to city council. They looked it over and they had their own counsel that I guess advises them on their franchise ordinance or the franchise fees. And she looked at it and they put it out for comment to the cell providers based on some feedback they got in the review of case law and so forth and federal statutes and guidance. They recommended some changes to the ordinance. Those changes were significant enough or detailed enough or covered enough areas that we thought, and they thought it needed to come back for another public hearing to review the changes. So that's what we're doing tonight. And we advertised the public hearing in the news graphic following KRS 424 guidance on public hearing. So there is public notice has been done. So this is the public hearing required prior to forward. And we would like to get another vote on it after we review. If you all are okay with the changes, we would like to get a vote recommending, giving the planning commission's recommendation. So prior to forward, because I'm gonna have to forward it to city council again for them to take it up and do the final adoption. I'll have to also forward it to fiscal court and Sadie'ville and Stamping Ground, since we have a unified zoning ordinance. So roughly, I'm talking about these small cell towers are new tower facilities or antennas and equipment on existing poles or new poles or other structures, either in right of way or in easements, or could be possibly on existing buildings or structures on lots. But generally, they're going to be in right of way or in access easements along the rear of lots or in alleys and so forth. So these are small structures, less than 50 feet. So they're not your typical cell tower, but these are for 5G and for to get better, get more uniform coverage in more densely built out areas. So these are, as you can see, I just threw some pictures in there so you can see what we're talking about. Matt, if you could just control the slides, just go ahead to the next one. I just have a couple slides in here just demonstrating what we're talking about. And here's another just kind of illustration of the types of poles. So these are going to be on light poles, either in more densely built out areas or on new poles or utility wooden poles or metal poles in built out areas for the most part. There will be some in neighborhoods within urban areas. I don't think they're going to roll these out to rural areas, but this is mainly going to be in the city of Georgetown. They may eventually roll some out into Sadie'ville and Stamping Ground, but mostly in the city of Georgetown or just the urban area around Georgetown. So as far as the changes go, city looked at it and they added a preamble. So it's mainly an introductory section. Well, let me just back up for a second. The ordinance itself is made up of a definition section, a section that just describes the content that we need to see in an application and the procedure through which it'll be reviewed and approved. And then the tower regulations itself are broken down by zone district. So we have regulations for all districts for these towers. Then we have more specific stealth requirements and setback requirements for residential districts. So more detailed kind of restrictions for neighborhoods and residential areas. And then also some general restrictions for non-residential. So those are just commercial and industrial areas. So the regulations themselves are broken down by district. And then the last part of the ordinance is just the evaluation criteria, how we evaluate it, how waivers are requested and granted, and then just the criteria we use to evaluate the applications once we get them in. So the changes that the city made, they generally follow. So the ordinance didn't change. The content didn't really change too much. It's still the same format, but they added a preamble, which is just, purpose statement, severability statement. So if one section changes, it doesn't negate the whole ordinance. So just mainly those legal preamble requirements that are in most ordinances, that those weren't in the one that we brought previously. So those have been added. And I do have you did get a copy of the changes in your packet too, so you can kind of follow along. The other major, I would say, change is that we required a pre-application meeting in the prior ordinance. And they were concerned that pre-application requirement, making that mandatory, would start the shot clock. So we're required, I think it's federal regulations require us to review these in a certain amount of time. So if we required that pre-application meeting to be to be a requirement, that they absolutely had to do that, that would start the shot clock. So they asked to make that optional, and I think we're okay with that at staff level. That meeting anyway was to give them guidance on and let them meet the utility providers and any other city agencies that they might have to go through. So if they don't want to do that, that's fine. So we made that optional just so it didn't start that shot clock. We did change the fee structure. So originally it was a graded fee. First tower, I think it was $500. Second tower would be $275. The third $225. So it was a graduated fee. We've simplified that to be just $1,000 per new tower. So any new pole with equipment on it would be considered a new tower. So $1,000 per tower. And then for equipment going on existing structures, so existing poles or buildings or what have you, the fee would be $100 each up to 10. So you can do up to 10 of those co-locations or just new equipment, not a new tower structure, but just the equipment for $100 each. So that just kind of simplified the fee structure. We removed a requirement there was a requirement for screening of equipment around these towers, which after review, it didn't really make a lot of sense to require screening in road right of way. So if these go on a tower that have some equipment attached to it, there was language in there requiring screening. So we're okay with that too. We dropped that requirement since most of these will be in road right of way. And then there were changes throughout, just small tweaks, adding in places where technically feasible. So where we had a requirement that maybe if it couldn't be met due to technological restrictions or requirements, there was a way to allow for some type of waiver or variance if it wasn't technically feasible to achieve the requirement. Other than that, like I said, generally, the regulations didn't change significantly. There were minor changes throughout the document that I won't go one by one, but the ordinance itself, the structure of it, the way applications, the content of applications, the way they're going to be reviewed, the way we evaluate them, didn't change significantly. We do still, in this ordinance, require a public hearing and board approval for any new towers, but any new just equipment added onto existing poles or structures can be approved through staff. So any new towers require an application, public notice, a public hearing, and board approval. But if they're just going to add, say, just the antenna and the equipment onto an existing pole in the right of way or in an easement or what have you, staff can approve those. Generally, the residential areas require stealth technology. So if there are new equipment going on a pole in a neighborhood, staff will have to evaluate the stealth technology being used, and we have some general guidance for that, but that will be left to the discretion of staff to make sure that they meet those requirements. I'll stop the presentation there. I don't know if you all have gone through it and had any specific questions, but I think some of the tower, one of the tower companies, and I think some of the providers may be in attendance. They may have some comments as well. And we did, put notice in the paper twice, so there may be some public in attendance as well. So I'll just let you turn it over to public comments, and then I can answer any questions. And you're muted, Mark, so.
There we go. Sorry about that. I see a hand up, and I apologize, Matt, if well, just for some of the attendees that this may be their first meeting, Charlie Perkins will swear you in, I guess one at a time as you speak. So I do see a hand up, and I apologize, I can't see whose it is. So Matt, you probably can see it. If you don't mind unmuting that person and letting them speak.
Yeah, he should, Mark, you should be able to speak.
Mark and board members, I apologize. We did not know, we were trying to figure out how we could unmute ourselves. We thought we wouldn't be able to talk. We are actually with the MJM hearing, so I apologize. I'll lower my hand. We're business later in the agenda, so I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, no problem. Anybody else want to speak? And again, it's in favor of or against. I mean, we've had many people in the past come in favor of a new cell tower, the larger ones, of course. This is, of course, our first, in my 6 years here, us hearing about the small cell towers. So anybody want to speak in favor or against? I do see a hand up there. I think that's.
Hello?
Matt, would you unmute? Tyler Flood?
He's
Is that
unmuted.
who's wanting to speak?
Can you hear me?
Mr. Flood?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So I don't know if this question is exactly the small cell tower, but I live out north of Stamping Ground.
Hey,
And you
excuse me,
mentioned-
Mr. Flood,
Yes, sir.
would you raise your right hand,
Yes,
please? Do you swear affirm the statements and questions you're about to make are the truth to the best of your information belief?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Go ahead, continue. Sorry.
Yep, no problem. So living north of Stamping Ground, just wondering, there was one cell tower that was put up, I believe, last year around March. At least that's when I noticed it. Is there any way that you guys can gauge interest or need of extra cell signal out in rural areas, since this may not be going out there for some time?
Joe, would you want to answer that?
I think you'll have to talk to the providers to see what their plans are. I know there's generally the new towers that we've gotten in, we're going to see larger towers out in that area. So we have a process for the providers to come in and apply for new towers, the larger kind that go out in the county.
Okay.
We've had a couple in recent years in that area. I'd have to look through our project folders to see if all been constructed, but and who they are, and I can maybe get you in contact with them to see if there's any plans for expansion to fill any of the gaps out there. I know the judge executive, Joe Pat Covington, is working hard to get better service out in the rural areas. I know he's, you might want to contact the judge executive's office and ask him about what he has in store or what ideas he has.
Okay. If there's any interest in trying to submit your property for a cell tower location, does that go through you guys or is that somewhere else?
No,
No.
yeah, contact the providers directly.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Flood. Mr. Mifflin, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a
comment?
question for Joe. Joe, you said the pre-application meeting was not mandatory, but if they don't meet, when does that shot clock start?
It would start when we get a complete application. So that when they submit their application, we have 10 days to review it and deem it complete, I guess. And once we notify them that we've got a complete application, then the shot clock starts.
Why can't we have a mandatory pre-application meeting, but the shot clock doesn't start until, they turn in their application? I mean, is it important enough that we should be meeting with them before the application?
I think it would be beneficial to meet with them. I don't know. That was their legal opinion. I mean, that came through the city, the city's consultant.
Okay.
I don't know exactly why they thought the shot clock would start. Maybe there's some case law on that.
I mean, if you don't have a meeting, if they choose not to have a meeting, it's not going to start until they submit the application anyway. So it looks like to me, that's when we could say that the clock starts is when they submit the application, whether they've had one meeting with you or none, or two or three.
Right. I don't know if Charlie has any comment on that. I don't know.
I think what the theory is once you require them to come in, the process has started. Even though they may still owe you some documentation, once they're required to come in, the clock has started, period.
Okay.
If you don't start it until everything is complete, well, then that's a finite date that's easy to determine. But if you've already required them to come in, that's good enough. They're going to call that it starts.
Thank you. Hey, Joe, also on page 6, where it's talking about the application fees, you
Yeah.
talked about $1,000 for a new tower application and $100 for, not the tower, just the equipment, but also in there, it mentions $500. But you didn't mention $500. What is that? And who gets these money? Does P&Z get these monies or the city?
P&Z would get it.
Good.
Yeah, and that's 500 for up to 5. So yeah, that's in there. Yeah, it's still $100 per.
Additional.
Yeah.
Anything beyond 1, is that right? If there's 2, it'd be an additional 100.
Well, yeah, I guess technically, it's $1,000 per new tower, and it's $500 for any new equipment, non-tower wireless facilities up to 5. So I guess we can charge them $500 even if there's just one.
Right.
One set of
So
antennas.
if they had 5, it would be $900. It would be 4 additional beyond the 1.
No,
I think it would be 500 for, say they had one new tower and 5 of the antennas going on existing poles, it would be $1,500. Say they have one new tower and 3 facilities going on existing poles, it would be $1,500 still. So it's $1,500 and you get up to 5 non-tower facilities. That's the way it's written.
So if they were to put 7 on one tower, that would technically be 1,700. Is that kind of
Correct.
how I'm reading it? Okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
It's not real clear, but oops. Okay, any other questions? I do see a couple hands. Unfortunately, I don't, Matt, you're gonna have to help me. I don't see who's raising their hand. under
Yeah,
the
we've got
attendees.
Phillip Brown.
I see
You should be
Charlie.
unmuted.
Hello?
Mr. Brown?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Mr.
Charlie?
Brown, if you would raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth, to the best of your information, believe.
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm Phillip Brown. I represent Crown Castle, and Crown Castle is a shared wireless infrastructure company doing business here in Kentucky with an office in Louisville. We are a national company that owns large cell phone towers, also install and own small cells, and the fiber that provides the signal to both those large towers and the small cells themselves. Crown Castle has filed written comments on your draft on October 29th, and just wanted to reinforce a couple of the things in our written comments for the commission. First and foremost, I want to say that Crown Castle places a high importance on being a collaborative partner with the jurisdiction when we're doing work in your right of way. And we'll really try to go above and beyond to address any concerns about a specific small cell, a process, location. If it's technologically feasible to change a location and provide the same coverage, we in the past with other jurisdictions have been more than willing to do that. Again, with aesthetics, we have a similar mentality. We want the poles to look as pleasing to a jurisdiction as possible. And I think that's why it's important, this process that the commission is undertaken, to provide some sort of written guidelines to the companies on what you expect the poles to look like and the other technical requirements that you believe are important. As I've said to other jurisdictions in the past, you can set the bar as high as necessary, and we will work to rise to meet it. But with that said, I think the only thing that we'll say, we want to let our written comments really speak for themselves as far as the detail. But our comments focused on a concern that we have that some of the elements of the draft are not in compliance with FCC rules and laws. To speak back to a point that was raised earlier about the pre-application process, we actually do speak to that in our written comments. Under the FCC's laws, if you require the pre-application meeting, that kicks off the application process and just starts the shot clock. It's an FCC regulation, just to answer that question. Another element that we touched on in our written comments deals with selective application of the zoning process in the right-of-way. The rules that you create are fine as long as they're competitively neutral, meaning they're applied across the board. And by imposing a zoning process on new poles in the right-of-way, we would have a concern that you've stepped outside that prohibition on selective application of the zoning process. And I think we would encourage you maybe to consider that point before adopting or sending this over to City Council for adoption. I think the last thing that we would say is that we've looked at the draft several times, and in the sections on the application process and the approval process, we believe there's a little bit, maybe not an intent, but in the drafting, some confusion on when staff approval occurs versus planning commission occurs. If your regulations, your design guidelines are published in advance, and there's clarity about what you expect, and a company like mine files an application that satisfies your published guidelines, then staff approval is a great option to pursue, because we would have followed the guidelines that you've published in advance. And that's one of the hurdles you have to clear in order to be in compliance with the FCC. You stated what you wanted, and the application satisfies all those requirements. Now, clearly this wouldn't apply to an application that doesn't satisfy your guidelines. The planning commission process, the zoning process for that, we're just we think the draft is just not quite clear about when is it staff approval versus when is it planning commission approval. And so, we would gladly, if anyone can speak to that tonight, that's fine. If we could, have an offline discussion about that point, we'd be open to that as well. With regards, I'll close with this. We have been installing small cells for over 10 years. We're the nation's largest provider of shared communications infrastructure in the country. And we'll be happy at any time to provide any insight that we can on whether it's small cells, fiber, the large towers. Again, going back to that point about wanting to be collaborative, we're happy to talk at any time about any questions on the technical side of things that this commission might have. And thank you.
Mr. Brown, have you had any discussion with any of the P&Z staff, planning and zoning staff here in Scott County?
The extent of that would have been filed written comments submitted to staff as well as your outside counsel in the fall of 2020.
Mr. Perkins, could it be okay legally to suggest that Mr. Brown either work directly with P&Z staff or our counsel, whether that's yourself or outside counsel, I don't know, and recommend maybe a continuance to make sure that we can hash all these details out and bring this back to us where both parties agree, so we're not even, I think if we can get both parties to agree that it looks right, to Mr. Brown's point, if there's certain things that are unclear in this ordinance, then maybe Mr. Brown, either our staff, yourself as legal counsel, can then hash out all the details. Then we can hear it. Then we can approve it to be recommended and heard by the city and I'm guessing fiscal court. Is that the right path that it needs to go?
Well, I think that'd be appropriate, but for clarification, that would not be me. The city has their outside consultants and outside counsel working on this. So it'd be our staff and
so,
then
then I would think for the benefit and to honor everybody's time, instead of us just going through all this, I would think that both the outside counsel, like you said, city's outside counsel, and Mr. Brown and any other entities that need to discuss this and hash out all the clarifying, wording, whatever it may be, and then bring it back to us. I'd actually entertain maybe a motion to continue this.
Mark, can I?
Later date.
Can I weigh in, Mark?
Yes, sir. Sure, please.
That's kind of the process that we've been going to. We forwarded it to the city. The city hired outside counsel who's been working with Crown Castle and others to get comments and try to amend the ordinance to address those comments that we can or that we're willing to address. I think we've addressed most, if not all of them, but as far as the process, any new towers go to the Planning Commission board. Any wireless facilities on existing poles or towers or buildings are staff level review. We can clarify that, maybe add a section that clarifies that. But opening it up again, I think it's just going to delay. It's just going to continue to delay it. If there's, we think this is a good ordinance. We can make some changes to clarify that so it's clear what the process is. But as far as the rest of it, I think we've kind of gone through that process of review. And with Linda Ain is the consultant that the city has hired. If we want to continue that and review it some more, I think we'd have to get with the city since they're paying her as a consultant.
Right.
And they would have to almost take the lead, not take the lead, but this is kind of their changes that they sent back to us for a public hearing. So we could certainly work with them, but if it's just a matter of clarifying what the process is, what has staff review and what has board review, we can clarify that either between now and next month, or we can just clarify it with the copy that we send forward to the city council, because I don't think that would be a huge change.
I guess what I'm concerned about is if the outside counsel and Mr. Brown and Crown Castle have been in discussion. I would have thought then we would have had an ordinance that the details have already been worked out. It seems like Mr. Brown has several concerns. If he's got several concerns, why weren't the details worked out before tonight's meeting?
Well,
And that's open to anybody, Charlie, Mr. Brown, or
Joe.
Joe.
I don't know.
Joe, if I may, from what I recall with our discussions with the city attorney and the council, and the outside counsel, we went through all the comments from both Crown Castle, Verizon. I think actually AT&T may have also submitted comments, and the results are, at least according to what I remember from the outside counsel, are in compliance with FCC regulations. So I think
Mr.
there are
Brown
some,
said they're not.
yeah.
And that's my issue, is Mr. Brown saying there's a couple things in here that either aren't in compliance, and then some language that may be a little confusing. I have an issue with that if there should be some discussion now, is Mr. Brown and our council or outside council allowed to have conversation, or are they only supposed to dictate through comments in writing? Are they allowed? Because I mean, to me, I'd like to see this hashed out, brought to us, completed, everybody's happy with it, open discussion, public hearing, and not have Mr. Brown saying we're not in compliance, against FCC rules. And I have an issue with that. So I just don't think the details have been hashed out properly. And
Mark, you also have to remember you have, multiple companies with different comments, and they may be contradictory. They may want different things. They may see different things in it.
You may never get everybody to agree.
Forever. I mean,
well, that's true. I mean,
you have to look at the public interest. What do you all feel? What protections do you think need to be in there as well? So you need to be involved as well.
I do like Mr. Brown's comments about, if we raise the bar aesthetically. I mean, I would love to see, and the examples Matt put up on the screen, I don't have my glasses on, but they looked really, really blurry. Just like the larger cell towers, I know the companies have worked with us in the past where they can be as aesthetically pleasing as possible. Now, the 200-foot towers are harder, but these, I'm sure there's a lot of different ways so they would not even be seen. I mean, I'm looking at the lighting down Main Street last night. It looked like we might be converting our lighting to regular LED lights, and it actually looked really nice last night. So of course, I'm thinking to myself, if we put these cell towers on our lights down on Main Street, how aesthetically pleasing will they be? And that was my first and foremost concern. And I liked hearing that from Mr. Brown, and he's going to work with us and make sure that if we raise the bar, which of course I'd like to always raise the bar and do its best and nice, make it look as nice as possible. I appreciate that. So I'm open. Charlie, what do you think as our legal counsel? I mean, is this something you think that, again, it is a public hearing, so we can definitely hear everybody who wants to talk about it. But as far as voting on this, we're not voting on this today, are we?
Yeah, we potentially are.
We could vote on this ultimately and send it to.
I believe the plan was to vote on it. The problems you pointed out, if in fact there are discrepancies, and I don't know, because the city's been dealing with this with staff and their outside consultants. I have not been, but of course you're right. We like to have these things in final form before we adopt them. And in fact, it sounds like staff in the city thought that's what this is. So it may be this is just simply a difference of opinion, and we can go from there. As far as what the specifics are, though, that I can't really contribute to because I've not been part of that process.
Matt, would you turn on Phillip Brown's mic again? It looks like he's got his hand up, I think, again.
He's still unmuted.
Oh, Mr. Brown, did you have something to say?
I didn't re-raise the hand, but I just, to close this out, we're happy to have, a direct conversation with staff, with Mr. Kane or anyone else. I think I would just say that if the commission intends to adopt regulations that apply a zoning process to a new small cell pole, we would call it a small wireless facility. It's typically a pole. It can look just like the decorative streetlights in downtown Georgetown. That's certainly always an option. It's actually easy. But if you intend to apply a zoning process to new poles in the right of way, then you are indeed selectively applying the zoning process to regulated utilities who are authorized to work in your right of way. And if you were to apply a zoning process to every regulated utility placing a new pole in your right of way, that would be not selectively applying the zoning process, and there would be no legal argument against that. But unless every regulated utility, like Crown Castle or the gas company or the electric company or the phone company, is required to go through a zoning process, then you're applying it selectively, and that would be a violation of federal law. Now, this jurisdiction, to be plain, wouldn't be the first one in the United States to adopt a regulation that is not in compliance with federal law. And that would become a question for the next provider that wants to go through this process, and they'll have to determine, is it worth it to deploy this critical infrastructure in a jurisdiction that is going to make me do something that is onerous and burdensome, and it's actually not legal to make me do it. Crown Castle might decide that we can live with that, or we might not. We might move on, and similarly with other providers. But where we are today, with 80% of 911 calls being made over cell phone, with the extreme usage of data that we've seen since people have been trying to work from home and go to school from home, I just don't think that any jurisdiction in Kentucky wants to adopt a regulation that might inhibit deployment of critical infrastructure. Now, is that a rhetorical argument? Yes, but it is backed by clear data that we've seen about the increases in usage since people have had to do everything with their public life from their house. And again, we want to work with you. We want to be collaborative. I do think we have a concern that part of what you're proposing to adopt is a violation of federal law. And I'll stop there. I'm happy to continue the conversation. And I think this is in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm going to defer right to my legal counsel, Mr. Perkins.
Well, I understand the argument that Mr. Brown's making, and it sounds quite accurate. On the other hand, I've not been part of the discussions whether there are exemptions to that general rule. I just simply I'm not involved in that. One thing that I might suggest, since staff and city feel like we have got this ordinance in the appropriate form for passage, then surely it's an appropriate form for P&Z to recommend it to the city. Keep in mind, all we're doing is we've had the public hearing, we're recommending it to the city. Then Crown Castle can contact the city, maybe work out some of those things, because it doesn't have to be in final form when it leaves us. They can make adjustments. We are simply required to do the preliminaries, get it to public hearing, go through that, and then recommend it to the city. They still are free to make any final changes they wish to make. And if this argument seems quite significant to me, the city will need to address that. If everything else is in pretty good shape, then I think it's appropriate then for us to go ahead and adopt based on staff's recommendation. And then he can contact the city, their consultants, and then they can iron out whatever remaining issue there might be.
And points well taken, Mr. Perkins, and I would agree with you. I mean, we definitely need more cell coverage in the county. And I think to speak to Mr. Flood's point, I mean, there's desperate need in some of the surrounding areas of Georgetown, but this is at least a starting point here in Georgetown, and then eventually it'll continue to expand to the rest of the county. I think I did. So thank you, Mr. Perkins. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for the comments. Holly Spade had her hand up. I don't know if she still would like to speak. Matt, would you unmute her? Mrs. Spade, are you? Yes, ma'am.
This is Holly Spade. I actually was just going to answer Mr. Mifflin's question, and since Phillip Brown already did that, then there's no need for me to talk.
Okay. All right. Any other comments from either the commission, attendees that are on here? Please raise your hand. Then Matt Summers will unmute you. No further discussion?
Talking about from commission or from the public?
Either. No, this is public hearing,
I'd-
so it can go both ways. From the commission, I'm opening it up.
I was just sitting here thinking about what Mr. Brown was saying, that I don't think that we regulate KU or AT&T or anybody else with, I'm sure the Public Service Commission probably does, but if they're just like any other utility, I don't know if we need to tell them how to conduct their business, but we don't say anything to.
If
don't
I may,
guess we say anything to Spectrum or anybody else, as far as running cable.
if I may, and Charlie, you can.
And
you
I
can
agree
correct
with
me
you,
if I'm
Mr.
wrong.
Smith.
We're not legally allowed to regulate KU or public utilities under the Public Service Commission outside of wireless communication facilities. State law does not allow the Planning Commission to regulate those.
But we can have some say in the wireless facilities.
In private entities.
Okay. All right.
I do like Mr. Perkins or Attorney Perkins' recommendations is we as a commission can send our approval to city council, and then they can adjust as needed any of the laws that need to be tweaked. So if we send our recommendation, and at that point, then they can work out maybe some of the fine details, especially if we're not in compliance when it comes to the law. But I know our planning and zoning department has spent a lot of time on this. And definitely I would not want to put this then I guess as a continuance, because it's just then wasting another 30 days. So any more comments from anybody, any of the attendees, the commission? If not, I guess I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve this with comments to the city council that there have been some questions brought up that they need to address before it is approved by the city. But as far as our recommendation, we recommend that they approve it with discussions from the suppliers.
Thank you, Mr. Mifflin. Well, before anybody seconds that, Charlie, would you, being our legal, note some of our concerns, both legally and maybe as a commission, some of Mr. Brown's concerns, and I probably agree with Mr. Brown on a couple of those concerns. And as we send this up for further approval to the city council, would you be able to help us in writing the narrative of our concerns?
Yes, sir. I would suggest that Joe, Matt, and I sit down and discuss those points, put together a cover memo, if you will, to the city attorney, and then hand it off.
Sounds like a plan. So we've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin. I need a second.
I'll second it. I
And
think there's
second
been
by
a lot of time.
Mr. Smith.
A lot of time.
Thank
put
you.
in on- I think we should.
Do we need, because this is a public hearing, do I need a roll call or can I just all in favor?
No, because it's a proposed ordinance, it needs to be roll call.
Okay, so I'll do a roll call. So let's start.
Should we close the
I'll-
public hearing
Mr.
first?
Stone, a yes. to approve
Yeah,
this?
I'm sorry, Matt. Yes, Mr.
Do we need
Chairman,
to close public hearing?
Yes, we need to close the public hearing before you do that. Yes,
Thank you both. So first I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Make motion.
Motion by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mrs. Mizell. All in favor to close the public hearing, say aye.
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 Now let's go into a vote. I've got a motion by Mr. Mifflin, a second by Mr. Smith. Let's do the roll call. So I'll start with Mr. Stone. Yes is in favor of sending a recommendation of approval to the city council.
Yes.
Mr. Stone,
Yes.
Mr. Mifflin, Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Mrs. Singer,
Yes.
Mrs. Mizell,
Yes.
and has Mr. Vest joined us? I didn't think I seen his name. Was he there?
He's not
I don't
here
think
yet.
David has joined us yet. So the chair, okay, the chair also says yes. So it is unanimously. Thank you all for the input. And now be forwarded. Thank you, Charlie and Matt and Joe for, again, getting together here in the very near future to bullet point our concerns and then getting it to city council in a timely manner. Thank you all. Next on the agenda under new business, FSP 2020-44 Mackenzie Springs Estate lots. This is a final subdivision plat to subdivide a parent tract of 112.88 acres into 8 total tracts located northeast side of Miners Branch and Owenton Roads.
Okay, this is my project, Mark. The request to subdivide a 112-acre farm into 8 new tracts. There is an existing house on the farm that will be on one of the tracts. There is also an old cutout. There's a house that was cut out, I think, from the farm or prior to the farm, the last subdivision of the farm. But I think it's a 1-acre tract with a 4-acre septic tank drain field, and that configuration was allowed, I think, in the 80s or 90s. We allowed 1-acre lots as long as you had an additional 4 acres in a drain field. So that's kind of what's on the farm already. So that's not part of this subdivision. That's just kind of a remnant of a previous action. All the lots meet our width and size requirements, and they have 50-foot setbacks, which we require in the A1. They all are proposing new driveways, which is I guess the main staff concern with this subdivision. I think we don't have any issue at all with the lots. They meet all our requirements. We do have a section of the subdivision regulations, and typically it applies to subdivisions on county roads because those are the driveways that we specifically approve. But we do have a requirement that any major subdivision that has multiple lots along a road, that we have 300-foot driveway separation where possible. This plat, Matt, can you forward the slide? This is the location. It's Miners Branch Road is to the north, Owenton Road is to the south here. You can see the existing lot or the existing house down at the bottom, and the house on the left there is the one with the drain field. But our subdivision regulations have a section that says basically anytime you have multiple driveways on and you're creating new lots, we'd like to see the 300-foot driveway separation. If not, you need to request and approve a variance. And this is just related to trying to discourage piano key lots. Typically, we've deferred to the state for driveway permits on state roads, but we are required to review and approve new subdivisions. So typically, we get the subdivision request prior to them applying for the driveway permit. So if we have any issues or concerns with driveways, we air them out and we discuss them as part of the subdivision approval. And then after they get preliminary approval through Planning Commission Board, is when they typically apply with the state for the driveway permits. We don't require them to have the permits in hand until we record the plat. So those issues are usually worked out prior to them applying for the driveway permits. In this case, they applied up front and they already have the driveway permits for these, I think 7 new driveways. So tracked, the track with the existing house has an existing driveway. So there's 7 new driveways essentially. And you can kind of see them. In this PDF, I've highlighted the driveway locations. So if you approve this subdivision, you also need to approve the waiver to the driveway separation. And we are recommending approval of the subdivision and approval of the waiver. But we are recommending that the adjoining tracks on the existing state roads, so track 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8 share a driveway, just to limit the number of driveways on those roads. So we are recommending approval with the variance stipulated that they share driveways on those lots that I mentioned, and the 5 conditions, which are standard conditions for final subdivision, rural final subdivision plats.
Any
That's all.
comments or questions from the commission? And there are instructions there and it looks like we've got a couple of people in the audience here who want to speak. So there are the directions there if you want to raise your hand. Matt, if you don't mind unmuting Mr. Schluter, if I pronounced that right, I hope.
Yes, sir, you did. Can you hear me, Mr. Solsky?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr.
Yes.
Schluter, if you could raise
Charlie,
your
would
right,
you swear Mr. Schluter?
yes, if you could raise your right hand, please. Do you swear a firm statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, sir, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Planning Commission and specifically thank Mr. Joe Kane, because this is our first time working in Scott County, and it's been a good experience just because of just strong communication, especially from Mr. Kane. So we thank you for that. My name is Mark Schluter. I'm representing MGM Farms. My brother Brian is also on the line, I believe, and we are partners in MGM Farms, a family business. So respectfully, we're requesting that the Planning Commission Board defer judgment on the entrances to the state and provide us a waiver for that, as these are state roads, and the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, KYTC, has already approved these entrances as safe, approved entrances. KYTC's Mike Stone studied these entrances in depth on multiple occasions. And the reason we applied for approval before we did our plat was we wanted to make sure that we had safe approved entrances before we worked the plat backwards. So I apologize if we took a misstep there, but we did that thinking that we would make the process easier by having safe approved entrances. And the challenge with sharing the driveways for us, at least, would be, these driveways. I mean, Mr. Stone came out multiple times, and we provided, limbing back branches, making sure the line of sight was what they needed so that they would be safe. And because of that, if we have to move these for shared entrances, we're not exactly sure on the approval of those entrances. There would be additional survey costs that would be involved. And again, we asked for the deferment and the waiver, the deferment to KYTC, because they've already approved these, and these are state roads. We respectfully submit that to the group.
Thank you, Mr. Schluter. Anybody have any questions, comments for Mr. Schluter? Or comments? You said, Mr. Schluter, you're representing the applicant? Is that my understanding?
Yes, MJM Farms. I'm a member. Managing
I
member.
didn't see. Okay. That's not who the applicant is, or I'm sorry. Well, we have owner.
I am an owner, but MJM Farms is the entity we represent.
Gotcha. Any questions by the commission? Okay, thank you, Mr. Schluter. Any comments, questions for Joe? Wow, we got a quiet crowd today. Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Flood looks like he has his hand up. Matt, would you unmute Mr. Flood?
Hello.
Mr. Flood, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So this is just one more question about the technology discussions. I wanted to know if this development or any of the others in the area have sparked any discussions for like internet services via cables through the ground. As far as I'm concerned, or as far as I'm aware, there's no like internet providers via cable. And I just didn't know if that has been a discussion point for you all. I live across from, I believe, track 8 there.
Normally, we don't have an IT discussion of applications, but I don't know. I mean, this may be the first. Generally speaking, Mr. Flood, I mean, we take what the applicant's looking for. In this case, it's dividing into 8 tracks. Usually, technology is never a part of our subdivision plat conversation. Nor is it even part of the conditions of approval. Okay. Well, that'd probably be something I would say you'd have to probably touch base with. I think at this level, it would be the county. So I would probably say this would be more of a fiscal court discussion. Would you not say, Joe?
Yeah, I would say so.
Joe Kane?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I don't know of any right offhand. I don't know what the service is like out there, although I've seen maps. We have service coverage maps, but right offhand, I don't know. I can't answer any.
Usually, Mr. Flood, when we are talking about IT and Wi-Fi and things like that, it's usually when we are hearing a particular application for a cell tower. Generally, to talk about it, unless it's on our agenda, we really don't. I know it's been a very, very hot topic, both in the city and more so in the county fiscal courts, because there is a deficiency in outside of the city of Georgetown for sure, including the Stamping Ground area, Sadieville, and the surrounding rural areas. So I'll be honest, I don't think this commission's even able to answer those questions for you.
Okay, no problem. I do appreciate you pointing me in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Flood. Appreciate you. Anybody else have any other questions? Hands raised? I don't think I see any other hands raised. Other than that, Mr. Warfield, Mark Warfield, would you unmute Mr. Warfield? Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Mr. Perkins, would you swear him in?
Yes, sir. Mr. Warfield, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I live on 1276 Miners Branch Road. I was just wondering what I'm seeing on the screen. Is this the whole subdivision?
Yes.
Hey,
Okay, and how many driveways will come on to Miners Branch Road?
3. There are 3 new driveways.
Is there going to be so there won't be a main entrance into the subdivision and then split off to the different lots? Is that right?
No, there's not going to be any new roads. These will just be private driveways. So these are just, if you can see the screen, these are just large tracts that are being subdivided with entrances off the state roads. So there's no new roads being constructed These will just be driveway.
And just for clarification, Mr.
Okay,
King, we are limited to one house on each of those lots. So it's not like there's going to be 150 homes out there. It's one home per lot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I know, Mr. Warfield, a lot of time people
Is there going to be,
subdivision, they're thinking we're dropping a couple hundred homes in your backyard. And in this case, it's 8 lots, maximum of 1 home on each lot. So hopefully that's.
is there any a regulation on what type of homes would be expected or anything like that?
The applicant could answer maybe what they're proposing, if they're proposing any deed restrictions, but it's zoned A1, so we allow modular mobile homes, modular homes, stick-built homes. So anything, it has to meet building code, but anything the building code would allow as a residence, we would allow in the A1 district.
It looks like Mr. Schluter has his hands up, so he might touch on what they're thinking, if they are in fact.
Yes, sir. I can answer Mr. Warfield's question. Yes, we do plan to have deed restrictions on all of these lots. They range, from roughly 6 acres to 28 acres. 1 home per lot, as that was stated. The deed restrictions we have, we will not allow single wide homes. Any home must be a minimum of 1,000 square feet on the base floor, not including porches or garages or wraparound porches, anything like that. And we're also going to require permanent concrete foundations. So there will be restrictions just to make sure to keep the homes nice. There's additional restrictions regarding, number of livestock that they can have there. Debris and trash not being able to be. I can provide a list of restrictions if that's required by the Planning Commission, but we do have planned deed restrictions to keep this a nice development.
Thank you, Mr. Schluter. Any other comments, questions by either the audience or the commission, please?
My one comment would be going back to what Joe was saying on the driveway entrances. The one nice thing I think about it having a few shared driveways is that also means that you have a shared area where mailboxes are. If you have 2 mailboxes instead of 1, that when they're delivering the mail, it's better, especially for me where I'm out on the road going from farm to farm. And if you get caught behind the mailman, he's pulling up and stopping and pulling up and stop. If he can pull over and take care of 2 mailboxes, you can get around him. But it's probably easier on him too if he doesn't have to go to an individual mailbox one after another after another.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other comments, questions? Now, again, we do have that variance on there. If this is either recommended for approval or denial, if it is a recommendation for approval, there is that variance. So keep that in mind. Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I can point one thing out, I understand.
Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I understand staff's concerns on the driveway, just as Mr. Smith's concerns, but being a state road, the state's final decision, we can't overrule that. They may, in fact, try to do something to accommodate our action on that, but being a state road, what they approve is what can go in, and we can't really stop that. That's why in most places.
So with you saying that, are you saying we need to remove that variance?
Yes. I don't know that I'm saying quite that strongly. It's just that ordinarily what we do is we ask them, to review and see about, be it consolidation, be it, whatever it might be. Because in general, final say on what goes on to a state highway is the state highway department. It's not us. And we can recommend and we can request, but I don't know that I would expect a whole lot more than them to say, yes, thank you very much, and then move on.
Right. Do you think we can maybe move the last sentence of that variance being final driveway locations to be approved by KYTC and PC engineer, maybe to a condition number 6? Would that be maybe the better way to put it?
And then they could have that conversation and the state can see about maybe altering what they've approved, or they would have the authority to say, no, we're not going to change it. So yes, sir, I think that could work.
Charlie, I would argue that the state has told us in the past that they are not looking at, they can't look at everybody's regs. They would give us jurisdiction on spacing and all that. All they're responding to is request for access. So they still defer to us on local regs. If we could go back to the previous slide, I would recommend the 2 shared locations would be between 6 and 7, because they've already got an entrance approved in that location. That would be a great place to share.
Excellent.
And then on 3 and 4, if they could both share the one that's approved close to the number 4 location, I think that would pretty much take care of our requirements if we grant the variance on the separation. I don't know if the applicant would consider that.
Sounds like a
Matt,
wonderful.
have you?
Ben,
Matt,
can you identify yourself for the public?
I'm sorry, is that to me?
Yeah, I said, Ben, can you just identify yourself for the public?
Oh, yes. This is Ben Krabs, Planning Commission engineer.
Charlie, does he need to swear in? No.
Oh, who? Oh, Stan. Oh, Stan. They're on the hook anyway. So no, he's.
Yeah, they're on. They don't need to. Right.
He's
Okay.
already on the
All right.
hook.
I didn't think so. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Ben, for identifying yourself. I think that. Where's the applicant like to speak? If the applicant would be okay with Ben Krebs' recommendation and thought this, and you're okay with that, Matt, would you unmute him in case he's muted?
He's already unmuted.
Okay. Yes, what I'm looking at, that is not a shared entrance right there that's on the bottom. I think it looks to me like there's 8 highlights. There's really only 7 driveways. So because tract 5 has its own entrance that's been approved, tract 6 has its own entrance that's been approved, and tract 7 has its own entrance that's been approved. So that is not proposed on there as a shared. And again, I certainly understand the Planning Commission's recommendation. I also understand where Mr. Perkins is coming from, and that's our understanding from KYTC. And so we respectfully, submit the request for a waiver to maintain the entrances as submitted, please. Thank you.
Ben, or even Mr. Schluter, is there just an approval for track 6 and 7, or the entrance is already there?
I'm not aware that the entrance is there this time.
No, there's approved encroachment permits for each of them.
Okay, so the permits are approved, but the recommendation by staff is to have a shared driveway 6 and 7, as well as 3 and 4. Even though you have approvals, it sounds like the recommendation of staff is to approve a shared driveway. Is that correct, Mr. Krebs?
Yes, that's correct, following the regulations that are in place.
Thank you. Any comments, concerns, questions by the commission for either the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, why is the developer opposed to having shared driveways?
I can answer that, Mr. We believe there's a shared maintenance issue. We believe it devalues our project and it devalues the lots for the project, because when you share a driveway, especially in a rural setting, you've got tractors, you've got equipment, if it's a muddy day and somebody's tearing up the water, who's going to redo the gravel? Who's going to manage the runoff? If there's ruts in the driveway, you're dealing with shared maintenance issues that many consumers do not want to deal with. Many proposed buyers do not want to necessarily deal with, especially if you can see the topography. And that's why before we wanted to submit this and bring forward a project like this, we went through the state approval process, because the entrances, if we couldn't have strong entrances, we didn't see the viability in the project for us.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Stone, what's your thoughts of this? I know you live out I'm in the city here, so we don't have any shared driveways in Georgetown. I mean, is it something that you think, living out in the country yourself, you'd prefer each lot have its own driveway? Or are you comfortable with possibly the recommendation of these? Yes, Mr. Stone, I just put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Really and truthfully, after looking at it, watching and listening to everything, the state has already approved them the way they are. So I think that's good to leave it that way. I think probably all this other stuff. How's that?
All right. That is a great point. If it's already been approved by the state.
Yeah. I believe it'd be better
Now,
off.
Ben, do you have the approval, or is it already in the file that it's been approved by the state?
I have not received that, any correspondence from the state.
Joe, have you?
I can answer that. Yes, we do have it. They've given it to me. I've talked to the permit engineer at the state as well. So we have the permits. I'll have one comment. It relates to Ben. Ben and I really didn't discuss this detail, but if you go back, Matt, can you go back one slide? Or maybe go forward 2 slides. There it is. Our regulations actually say, and it's in there, I mean, to get driveway separation, but also to address these piano key lots when you have multiple 5 to 10 acre lots along a county or state road. But it specifically says every 2 adjacent 5 to 10 acre lots in one subdivision in A1 shall either have shared access, direct adjacent access, or access separation of at least 300 feet. So Matt can go back now to the plat. So track 3 and 4, I mean, it would be great to have those shared, but they are greater than 10 acres. So they're not 5 to 10 acre tracks. But tracks 6, 7, and 8 are. I would suggest we do allow adjacent, directly adjacent driveways. So how about if track 6 and 7 just use that general that lot line location where one's approved, but they just have directly adjacent driveways. So they.
Joe, you said 6, 7, 8. Do you mean 5, 6?
6 and 7.
5 is greater than 10 acres. I mean, 6, 7, and 8 are between 5 and 10 acres. So those are
gotcha.
Piano key lots. So how about 6 and 7, instead of sharing a driveway, they just have directly adjacent driveways. And then 3 and 4, if the applicant doesn't want to agree to directly adjacent on those, I mean, I guess you can let it go since they're larger tracks, but how about the option for directly adjacent, since that one location's already approved by the state? Rather than having a one right in the middle of the lot like that, and then you have 3 in a row, you have at least 2 of them right next to each other.
I think that would be a good
Then could
compromise.
maybe share a mailbox to Stephen Smith.
Mailboxes, and every time
And
a
that
garbage
helps.
truck stops, the garbage truck doesn't have.
I was deferring right back to you, Mr. Smith, because I figured that might make you happy, because like you said, be one less stop by the mailman, the garbage man, all of that, even, and they won't have a shared driveway, but at least they'd be adjacent to each other, so it would help with traffic, especially farmers. Mr. Schluter, are you okay with that?
Yes, I want to make sure I understand your comment, Joe, because tract 6 is greater than 10 acres, but you're saying 6 and 7 right here. You're saying between 6 and 7, have them adjacent.
Yeah, I'm saying right there, I missed that. I thought it was less than 10 acres. It is greater than 10 acres. But I think it would still be good to have those directly adjacent there.
So you don't have the 3 driveways just bang, just one right after another.
In good faith, may I say that I think that is a good compromise, but I say that understanding that we need the state to approve that. Would you be able to assist us with that in any way?
Sure.
Okay. You've been good to us, Joe. We appreciate the communication. So I think that's fair. Brian, my brother, if you're on the line, do you agree?
Matt, would you unmute Mr. Schluter, Brian? I should say Schluter.
And if I may, the second Mr. Schluter, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm what you're about to say to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do, Mr. Perkins. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I think that would be good, and we can coordinate that with Mr. Stone from the Department of Transportation and see if that would work.
Sounds like we've worked out most of the details here, so I appreciate everyone's time on this. Anybody else in the audience need to speak or commission? And then with some of these changes, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion for approval based
Anybody?
on the changes,
Mrs. Mizell made the motion to approve.
based on the motion, with the changes
Recommended
that
changes.
were made.
So I have a motion by Mrs. Mizell.
I'll second.
I had a second by Mr. Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, pass it. Thank you all. Appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're moving on. Thank you. Just for the record, the application that needs to be signed is down at P&Z, or is it at your office, Charlie?
That's at the planning
Perkins.
office.
Okay, so Mr. Schluter, you all need to go into the planning office to sign all the documentation for the approval. And you can just call them and they'll make an appointment for you to come on in. All right, thank you all. Moving on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solsky. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next on the agenda under new business, PDP 2020-45. This is 676 Seabury Road. Development plan to add gravel parking lot to event venue approved for a conditional use permit by the Scott County Board of Adjustment located at 676 Seabury Road.
Okay, this is my project as well. This is a 5-acre tract with a house and a barn and a riding arena. It was approved by the Board of Adjustment for a conditional use permit for an event venue, I think last year or maybe the end of 19. One of the conditions, well, they added a bunch of conditions on it, but one of them was that they come to the Planning Commission and get approval for a development plan for the project. They're proposing a parking lot that's kicks it up into a major. Otherwise, if it was just a small parking lot, it could have been approved by staff, but any parking lot over 20 spaces requires the board approval. In addition, they're asking for a variance, so that would have kicked it to the board anyway. But they're asking for approval for a 50 space parking lot, gravel parking lot for guests of the events they're going to hold on site. And then they're adding 2 handicap spaces adjacent to the existing barn. They are renovating the barn, and they're also adding a small bathroom addition I guess, for more capacity. This is a rural tract, just outside Stamping Ground. It is only going to be used for occasional events. I'm not sure how often they plan on holding events, but it won't be used every day, certainly, because it is a rural area. We don't really have major concerns with gravel, just because it won't be heavily used. And it's not directly adjacent to any houses, existing houses or subdivisions. So dust from the parking lot shouldn't be a major issue, I wouldn't think. But we would like to see at least the driveway to the parking lot, which is going to see, a lot of back and forth traffic. We would like to see that paved. And we also like to see this sufficient width and construction to be able to handle emergency traffic. So fire trucks, if they need to go get back there in an emergency. And we would like to see if you can see from this aerial, you can see the driveway is paved now. It's apparently 10 feet wide from Seabury Road back to just beyond the house where there's a small parking area. The proposed parking lot is behind the barn, so you can see it's another couple hundred feet to the barn, and then the parking lot would be behind that. So we'd like to see that area, so the drive extended and that paved, and the turnaround area and the parking, handicap parking, be paved back at the barn. We are okay with gravel for the parking lot itself, and any gravel lot, really you can't do interior BUA parking, which we require on any new commercial parking lot. So we're okay with a variance to the interior landscaping as well. We would like to see the perimeter landscaping done, and that's shown here on the development plan. So I guess to get to the recommendation, we are recommending approval, but that the driveway width be paved and be of sufficient width to meet county fire department requirements, which fire code requires 20 feet of clear area for any drives and access roads. So I'm not sure if they would require that to be 20 feet. I think 16 feet would be enough to get two-way traffic through there. So they may allow less than 20 feet, but we think that should be paved all the way back to the parking area and including a turnaround area at the barn. Other than that, we are recommending approval along with the condition that they get health department approval for the expanded septic system area for the private sewage system. And then building department approval of any renovations required in the barn to allow for assembly. And those are pretty significant requirements from what I understand, but we are recommending approval of the variance to the parking lot itself, but not to the driveway. In addition, we're asking for a final storm, because the parking lot's so big, we're asking for a final stormwater management reports be submitted to Planning Commission engineer prior to final development plan approval.
Anything else, Mr. Kane?
That's all I have.
Commissioners, anybody have a question for any questions for Joe? Otherwise, we'll hear from the applicant. Okay, we'll open it up to the applicant. It looks like we've got Mr. Rathel online as well as Mr. Drury. It looks like Justin Drury online, who's the consultant. I'm not sure who wants to speak first or if you're both going to speak. Looks like Matt's unmiked or unmuted, Mr. Drury.
Justin Drury, with AIM 3D.
Excuse me, Mr. Jury, if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the
Thank you,
statement
Mr.
you're about to
Perkins.
make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins.
I didn't catch that. Is Mr. Rathel on?
He is on.
Okay.
He's muted, but I'm sure he may want to speak as well.
Yes, I would defer, the
Okay.
agreement with the conditions to him, since he's the owner.
Matt,
but
would you unmute
I'll
Mr.
stand by
Rathel,
for any further
please?
questions.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Rathel should be able to unmute himself.
Okay. Mr. Rathel, would you unmute yourself, please? And Mr. Rathel? Mr. Rathel, you're still on mute. There you go.
And Mr. Rathel, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Yes, sir, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, sir.
As far as like the health department and stuff goes, I've had them come out there and do the tests and stuff. So the septic is good to go. I just got to get that all started. And that's pretty much it. That's all I have right now.
You're okay with all the other requests? Looks like a 16 to 20 foot wide driveway, paved. Looks like a paved parking for handicap, and all the other 10 conditions.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Any other questions either from Mr. Rathel or Mr. Drury by the commission? Yeah, I was able to drive out there as I spoke on Monday, and I mean, my concern was the gravel, but I did realize that, again, the home seemed far enough away that shouldn't be a problem. I think half the driveways out there to the residents' homes were probably gravel. Well, I think maybe one or two that was concrete and one or two that was pavement. So I didn't see it to be a problem at all, based on the recommendation of our staff. So I appreciate all the hard work on this one. Any other comments, questions? Otherwise, if not, I don't see any more hands up. I'll entertain a motion.
Mark, I did have one question.
Yes,
where is the septic? Where are the field lines going? Are they shown here?
Joe or Matt, would you put the map up? There you go, and kind of show.
I was trying to figure out where they.
Between the house and the barn on the left.
All right. Oh, I got you. Yeah, proposed restroom. That's where the restrooms go. Then the
proposed restrooms are shown, but not the septic lines.
there it is.
Oh, no, they are.
Sewer,
I'm
sewer
sorry.
laterals. There they are. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All right. I'm just making sure they weren't going to be back there in your parking lot.
Good question, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I need a motion then.
Mr. Chairman, I've moved that we accept this application and along with the 10 conditions of approval, and including the 2 variances.
Variant. Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Smith
Second.
and a second by Mrs. Mizell. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Motion passes. And again, Mr. Rathel, please go to or call planning and zoning and make an appointment to go in and sign the appropriate documentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next on the agenda is the PDP 2020-47, the American Mini Storage Expansion. We've got a preliminary development plan for a 23,430 square foot expansion of store units and association asphalt paving located at 100 American Path.
on my application. I apologize for the error in
Yours
the
came
staff
up.
report where it says association staff asphalt paving. It should say associated.
When I read that, I kind of said, what? Associate, thank you. When I read it, I thought that didn't make sense. Thank you.
It's definitely one that spell check won't catch.
Exactly.
But yeah. So the location of the project site is at 100 American Path. The zoning of the property is B2. It's our highway commercial zoning district. All the surrounding properties are also zoned B2. The site itself is just over 5.5 acres. Access to the lot comes from American Path, although Lusby Path, as we'll see, does run around two sides of the lot. And there are two waivers that are being requested with this application that relate to the landscaping requirements. This is an image I included, both showing the current zoning of the property, and then as you can see, this is a site that development started on the lot several years ago. I believe in the early 2000s, as the staff report describes. And there are 4 buildings that exist out there today. And the application before us would seek to finish out the rest of the development, adding a 5th building roughly here in this area where I've got the mouse. Let's see, go to the next slide. This is the development plan that was submitted to us. So you can see, we've got the 4 existing buildings, and the darker building here on the north side of the lot is where they're proposing that 23,430 square foot new building to finish off the development. They're also proposing asphalt paving around so that access can be, so the users of the site can have access to all sides of that storage building. They are showing appropriate landscaping trees around that vehicular use area to screen it from the adjoining private road as required by ordinance. And I did include there was a small issue with the development plan that was submitted previously, but this is an updated version that's not in your packet. I received it just the other day, but I included it in the presentation. The only real difference is I think on the ones in your packet, there's a small area here on the side where it's labeled as a concrete pad, but that is in fact a full existing building for the entire length there. So really the only the proposed building meets all of our setback requirements, height requirements. The project site meets our building coverage requirements. So the only I guess to my mind the issues to discuss with this application really surround the landscaping. First of all, I think it's section 6.13 of the landscaping ordinance requires the vehicular use area to be screened if there's adjoining right of ways, whether those be public or private. So Lusby Path does kind of come and wrap around 2 sides of this property, and so that's why they've included these trees here. And I point this out just because the ordinance also calls for there to be a shrubbery, a fence, a wall of some kind in addition to those trees, and there is an existing fence. The existing fence doesn't meet the opacity requirements that the landscaping ordinance requires. So really in this instance, what the ordinance is trying to prevent is headlights from somebody in the project site from shining in the eyes of somebody on the road and perhaps causing an accident or something of that nature. And that's why in the ordinance there is some language in there that where the shrubs or wall, what have you, is not required when the road sits at least 3 feet higher than the vehicular use area. So if there is an area on the project site where the road is that much higher than the VUA area, we wouldn't require shrubs or something added to the existing fence. But in those areas where it doesn't meet that requirement, we will need that. The applicant is also requesting a waiver to interior VUA landscaping. So, at this point, we're all pretty familiar with those. Typically, when somebody constructs a parking lot or things of that nature, we require landscape islands or peninsulas to provide additional greening, tree canopy, as well as some amount of stormwater treatment. They're requesting a waiver to that, and I think that's appropriate. As I mentioned in the staff report, other developments of this type, we have waived those requirements or reduced them. And with this being a project that's, almost nearly built out, I think it would be kind of burdensome to now require additional landscaping islands when that wouldn't be in character with the rest of the development. And then the last item that they're requesting a waiver on is to our tree canopy requirements. When the project was started and when the first 4 buildings were built, we did not have canopy tree requirements, and we do now. So I'm okay with granting. I'm recommending approval of the waiver to waive those requirements and just sort of let the project be developed with the trees that they are proposing to meet our vehicular use area requirements. So with all that being said, I am recommending approval of the application. I'm recommending approval of the 2 waivers that are listed here in the screen and in the staff report. There are 7 conditions of approval, all of which are standard for development plans.
Matt, did I understand you right? But you are wanting, instead of the trees on the wrought iron fence and along, is there shrubs? Is that what I heard you say?
It wouldn't be instead of, it would be in addition to.
Okay, thank you. So
yeah, the ordinance requires, typically we would require trees every 40 feet.
Maybe the shrubs in between.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions of the commission of Matt? And then, of course, we'll open it up to the applicant if not. Any questions? Comments, concerns? All right, well, I will open it up to the applicant. It looks like we've got Mr. Lusby, Mr. Johnson on here. So either of you want to speak? It looks like you're both muted. So if you wouldn't mind, unmute yourselves and have at it.
Hey, Chairman Solsky, I just unmuted. This is David Lusby. We appreciate.
Excuse me, David. If you and Greg, do you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make to be the truth to the best of your information and belief for both of you?
I do.
And Greg?
Floor is yours.
Well, we'll get him in a minute.
I do also.
There he is.
Talking. I do.
I can hear you both.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg.
I think he said he does.
Yeah.
I think the request is pretty straightforward. We are making, I guess, the request in regards to the landscaping. We recently completed a project there on Paris Pike, and as you may have noticed, the landscaping that we did far exceeded the requirement. And as far as this project goes, we plan on doing something that's going to be very attractive and appealing for the area as well. But as far as having interior landscaping, the project has not had that, so we just didn't see any sense in adding the interior landscaping. It really is to no one's benefit. So anyway, it is what it is. We'll be glad to answer any questions. It's just a continuation. This is the last building that we can build. We set back from any other buildings. We're not going to have any negative impact on anyone else. And, we will certainly take care of our landscaping going forward into the future. And we want our projects to look nice, and the landscaping is a big part of that.
Any questions from Mr. Lusby or Mr. Johnson? And Matt, are you okay if they do not have any interior landscaping? I did drive out there. I guess mine will be a comment and a question. A, are you okay with the not having interior landscaping, which I don't think there, as I drove out there, I don't think there was any out there currently. And then secondly, it's a more of a comment for Mr. Lusby, and I appreciate him being on previous applicants in expecting the standard to be above and beyond. I'd ask the same of Mr. Johnson and Lusby and expect it to be, and would think it would be wonderful, to say the least. So Matt, you want to answer that question? I think the other was just
I do support
Mr. Johnson.
I do support that waiver. Yeah, I agree. I think it would be out of character with this development and other developments like it. And in the case of this development, the only interior landscaping that does exist, to my knowledge, is around the parking lot area near the office.
Oh, yeah, I guess there is some there.
Yeah.
I think that's consistent with other developments like this.
Yeah. One thing that I would say is I don't think that the community would benefit from the interior landscaping. So what we plan to do is essentially take the funds or take the money that would have been spent on the interior landscaping and improve the perimeter landscaping so that it literally does benefit the community and those that drive by.
Mr. Lusby, did you say you're okay with the shrubs between the trees as well? And I think that'd be a nice look.
We can certainly do that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions for Mr. Lusby, Mr. Johnson, Commission, or attendees? Looks like we've got a couple attendees on there, Mr. Baker and Mr. Capra. I'm not sure. I think this is our last application to be heard. So did Mr. Baker or Capra have anything to say with regards to this application?
Mr. Baker's the consultant for the applicant.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, I see. It's Steve Baker. Sorry, Midwest. Mr.
No
Baker,
problem.
did you have anything to add?
I don't. Matt's been fantastic to work with.
Oh,
on
Charlie,
this.
would you swear Mr. Baker in? I'm sorry.
Well,
Mr.
we're not going to
Perkins.
believe these compliments of Matt anyway, so why put him under oath to tell him? Mr. Baker, do you swear affirm the statement you're about to give of the truth to the best of your information and belief?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Matt's been great to work with, and I think we worked through most of our
Thank you.
questions beforehand, so nothing to add.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Commission, Mr. Lusby, Mr. Johnson? Of course, you did a great job there on Paris Pike. That
I'm
place looks
good.
wonderful.
Thank you.
And we'd expect the same with this.
We'll
Thank
do it.
you. Thank you very much.
A motion.
I would move that we approve PDP 2020-47 along with the 2 variances and the 7 conditions of approval.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And I didn't hear who seconded it. I'm
Charlie
sorry.
Mifflin.
Charlie Mifflin. Mr. Mifflin, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you both, Mr. Lusby and Mr. Johnson. Of course, get a hold of planning and zoning and sign all the proper documentation. Thank you also, Mr. Baker. We
Thank
do have
you.
Mr. Capra on here, and I don't know if he, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I don't know if he needed to speak. Okay, maybe he's just here listening.
I'm just here listening. I'm new to the community. This is John Capper, and I just wanted to listen in and hear how your board members on your board. That's I've only been in here for 3 years, and appreciated listening, and thank you.
Oh, we always like having an audience that doesn't have any interest one way or the other, but just to listen. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully we kept you a little entertained. So other than that, it looks like, of course, anybody take a look at all the updates of previously approved projects. Anybody have any questions or agenda items? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if anybody wants to make a motion.
So moved.
Don't want to sit here all night. First, a motion by Mr. Mifflin, a second by Mr. Smith, all in favor to adjourn.